It is Monday, Memorial Day, May 20th, and I was up late last night recording with Rick Rosner, so we'll see if he joins us or not, because we were recording an episode of Naked at Night, the show that he does that is kind of like point counterpoint with his good friend Lance Richland, who is definitely a very conservative gentleman, and all along those lines. And they had a reporter, Scott from Canada, as well. So we definitely had a good and lively discussion. And of course, they had JD, the musician, who also added some political insights as well. As a matter of fact, I think this Saturday he's celebrating his 60th birthday, but he has definitely got some perspective from the Latin American community and all along those lines, as he lives in California, as do the other two gentlemen. And if I remember correctly, he is definitely a troubadour, but is also a person that moved when he was a child. I want to say from Mexico, but don't quote me on that. We'll have to see if we can bring him into our new show and see if that is the case or not the case, as I try to recall and all along those lines. But of course, we know a lot's going on in the world as always, and we'll be talking about what's going on. Trump calls Putin crazy after a massive Russian aerial assault on Ukraine. So Trump blasted Putin as absolutely crazy as Russia targets Ukraine with massive wave of drones and. So Macron says that Trump realized Putin has lied about Ukraine as Kyiv is hit by record drone strike. So we'll see how this goes. There was a time that folks thought that there were a number of conflicts. As a matter of fact, Scott brought up the fact that the most of the world media has been paying attention to the conflict in Ukraine, with Ukraine and Russia, and of course the conflict in Israel as far as Gaza and everything like that. But he brought up this notion that there are a number of wars, including ones in Cameroon and Sudan and a number of other places that are, he said something like the total of 13 or something like that. And a lot of them are on the African and the Asian as well. But he was talking about how a lot of the, and a lot of times the focus is on the two main conflicts and all along those lines. So I don't know whether folks are going to agree with what Scott had to say on that show. You can go back and watch that edition. It's probably going to air several times right here on Pod TV, and hear some of the other insights that both Scott and Lance had, because they also talked about something that I know Jonathan Lockwood, who is part of our Russia Ukraine show, talks about, which is the whole notion of Star Wars and all along those lines. So it was definitely a good conversation and an interesting conversation that was had, that was definitely insightful, to say the least, and everything like that. So definitely folks are paying attention to that and seeing what folks have got going on in that. So definitely a lot of people were paying attention to that part of the story. And like I said, we do know that the attacks continue in Ukraine and all along those lines. So definitely a lot of folks are paying attention to that as well. So definitely we'll see how folks react to a number of these stories that are coming from around the world and in the world theater and all in that. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what folks' reactions to a number of these stories are. And like I said, it was a pleasure to work with Rick on that show and to hear some insights from a Canadian journalist. And I know that John's from Canada as well. So we'll get to some of the other news stories as I try to bring up my Google News and some of the other news sources that I use and all along those lines. But we'll see what folks have to say about a number of these stories that are going on. And hopefully Nick will bring in our esteemed panel and we can get into this discussion and all along those lines and see what folks have to say as I do some adjustment on this particular computer and all along those lines. So, Nick, any thoughts about some of these news stories? And if you want to bring in our folks and everything, then we'll just have a continued conversation and I'll get to some of the other news stories as technology works or doesn't work. So, any thoughts on the various news stories?
Well, that's what I was looking at, is the technology, because is my voice coming through okay?
Which is coming through loud.
Okay. I want to bring John on. He's from Canada, but he's also backlit. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
You're backlit, which in English means, yeah. You got to close your blinds because what happens is that the light goes through, and it's just one of those things, you know.
I hope that's better.
It's one of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, the only thing I picked up on the news was your friend Elon Musk, and everybody loves Elon. He just announced he had this super hypersonic plane that he developed. So he's going to use it for maybe reposition it for his Star Wars so he can get billions of dollars, 20 billion, 500 billion from the federal government. Remember, he says he's working for free, but as we know, that ain't happening. He's working on behalf of Tesla and his SpaceX and all this other stuff to land government contracts. And it was the US government that made him wealthy beyond any possible imagination by bailing him out with the by bailing him out by letting him do the satellites and taking NASA contracts. Now he claims he only has $1 million in the bank. And all his assets are tied up in Tesla and when he needs money.
And these different other things in Doge and everything like that. I did have a question because I did finally get my news sources up and everything. So, John, what is the reaction of people in Canada to King Charles III's visit to Canada? Because apparently he is visiting Canada to underscore its sovereignty to Trump and everything, and he's going to open the Canadian Parliament amid Trump's 51st state talk and everything like that. So there's a royal visit from King Charles and Queen Camilla, and I didn't know if y'all were paying attention to that there in Canada and what folks thought about the royals coming to Canada.
Yeah, I think I can't obviously speak for most Canadians, but I think most Canadians are kind of indifferent to the monarchy in Canada. It's more, it doesn't have any kind of deep significance for most Canadians.
Well, that makes sense and everything. Well, something that may have significance to the world because we've been seeing all these different deals that apparently Nick might be interested in this. Macron, who's over there in France, and I know that Nick now lives in Spain, has been in the news twice, and one of them involved family matters and everything. But France and Vietnam signed a deal worth $10 billion, that's billion with a B, as Macron visited Hanoi. So France's Macron on a visit to Vietnam urged for greater cooperation in defense and trade, and he aims to seize on ongoing reforms to boost French investment. So Vietnam, squeezed between America and China, is looking for new friends, and one of those new friends might be none other than the French and everything like that. But apparently there was also a viral video, and this comes down to social media, where sometimes you don't know everything that's going on around you. So Macron dismissed a viral video showing an apparent shove from his wife, Bridget. So Macron says he and his wife were horsing around when she appears to push the French president. So it says French President Emmanuel Macron was pushed in the face by wife Bridget in a viral moment caught on video, and Macron's entourage denies he was slapped by his wife on a plane upon arriving in Vietnam. We do know that those of you that are married, and I can't remember if John's married, I know that I'm not, and I know you are, Nick, but we do know that sometimes couples, whether they're married or not, do sometimes play around and horse around and all along those lines. So it's like a lot of things, this may be one of those overblown things. So do we pay too much attention to what's going on in social media, since apparently they were horsing around, and they even said they were horsing around, and there was some pushing and some shoving going on in their playful playing.
Now, social media is the purveyor of all truth. Come on, we have to listen to social media, and as long as he didn't get pushed off a cliff, I guess everything's okay. So wait, Dr. Sharif has something to say from our friends in Asia.
Yes. Thank you. First thing first, I just want to give thanks to Pot TV. I'm heavily promoting Pot TV in Bangladesh and in our network around the world. Recently, there are some progress with the stock exchange commissions in Bangladesh, with defense, all of the defense people, army person, army chief of staff inviting me in their headquarters, and I promote especially our like this world editions, our economics edition with Honorable David Walkers. Beside that, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Dubai, they have a lot of improvement in terms of business and everything. So I promote World Talent Economic Forum. They want to see Nick Palveda and all of our fellow speakers in Bangladesh or in Dubai or in China. Maybe it will be great networking for all of us. Besides that, I want to bring some important issues because as populism around the world is growing after Trump administration come, I can understand how why Nick actually doing all of the defense and everything because this is his right. He has to save his country. He has to save his people. I appreciate it. So I also request these Bangladesh communities, this Malaysian community, how they can develop their own country with their own financial strength, and that may be good for everyone. But beside that, I just want to share some of the crises from Bangladesh perspective. Maybe USA can help us. Number one, ASEAN leaders address Myanmar crisis at East Asia Summit. Bangladesh was also heavily affected by these Myanmar issues because we have lot of Rohingya in our country, and I can understand Nick Palveda pain, why he do not like immigrant or something. I understand completely that they create crises and all of the things because millions of people right now they are in Bangladesh, and we have a huge diplomatic tension in between army and government to give a corridor to Myanmar. I completely understand your logic and everything. Secondly, Asia Pacific faces surge in cyber attack. So I believe that how we can improve this like USA and Asia Pacific relationship to solve the cyber attacks and all of the critical component because I'm just sharing the critical things because it's happening. So how we can improve, how we can develop better digital twin, how we can utilize cyber securities and everything because millions of people they are observing right now Port TV, right? So Port TV also has to secure their platform in an effective way. I'm also part of Port TV because my World Talent Economic Forum is part of these things. Beside that, I will request how these tariff issues can be solved. Maybe the civil society, what you have, the Sport TV, they can help to contribute to solve these tariff issues, not only for Bangladesh, for Asia, for Europe, and for global communities. And beside that, I believe that populism is not bad in terms of developing country, in terms of developing leaderships, in terms of developing the capacity. So I want to invite you all in Bangladesh, in Asia, to make a uh, effective world, to make a futuristic world, so we can be a good global citizen. So recently we have a massive improvement. I told you my objective, how I can support 100 million people in Bangladesh. So all of the civil society, government administrator, army, politicians supporting my objectives, and I'm bringing 100 million people connections in my conference maybe in the next month. So I want Port TV as our partners, and they can broadcast the our conference. And secondly, I want to say that we have to develop a better world with the help of each others. It's not only money, your knowledge and your wisdom also valuable for us. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sharif. A couple notes. Number one, Pod TV will be here and Trump will be gone, just in case you don't know. You can tell the people in Bangladesh that it's 3 years from now or 4 years from now, Trump will be in a history book somewhere. He'll be gone, but we'll be here. He won't be. Tariffs, 3 or 4 years from now, they're going to be gone. But Pod TV will still be here. So you can rest assured the people in Bangladesh, the reason they want to work with Pod TV is we're going to be here and Trump won't. Certainly.
Hey, Nick, just along those same lines and everything.
I am not kidding. We have unlimited life. He doesn't. He's set to expire in about 3 years from now. So you'll be looking in the rearview mirror with Donald, his tariffs, his craziness. It'll all be gone, but Pod TV will be here.
Well,
Yeah,
speaking
yeah,
of them being gone and everything, we got Rick with us, and I did mention Rick's show that we recorded last night, and I was telling him about Scott and everything, because one of the things we discussed toward the end of the show, and I was kind of wondering other people's attitudes about this, is the fact that I think Scott said that there were 13 conflicts, and he did mention Myanmar, he did mention Sudan, he did mention Cameroon, he did mention a bunch of others that are barely covered by any of the media, whether they're right or left, but the main focus is on Ukraine and Russia and definitely Israel and Gaza. So I think that I am stating that correctly, Rick, but if you want to clarify what Scott was talking about.
No, it's okay. Have you mentioned today is the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's murder?
I did not mention that, but it is the 5th anniversary.
So racists all over Twitter are running. There were 2 autopsies on Floyd. Both of them concluded homicide, which is a little obvious to you if you've seen the tape. The cop knelt on his neck for 9 minutes.
Yeah.
But there's one page of one of the autopsies that says he had fentanyl in his system, like 1/3 of a lethal dose. He had 11 milligrams per, whatever. It takes 34 to kill you. So people are racists, racists and MAGAs all over the place are throwing up that one page out of context and saying, look, he didn't, the cop didn't kill him. And if you're doing that, you're an idiot. I mean, George Floyd.
There's a lot of idiots on social media.
He wasn't a hero, right? He was a guy who had some serious scrapes with the law, but he didn't deserve to be murdered for trying to use a counterfeit $20 bill, which was the original offense. And it's likely he didn't even know the bill was counterfeit.
Yeah, he might not have known it was counterfeit. Speaking of that, and I know that on this network we have the Dr. Pat Miss show and everything like that, but one of the things that I think I brought up, but if I didn't bring it up, I won't bring it up on this particular show, is that apparently he recently came out, or Trump came out, and said that autism is induced. So I was wondering what folks thought about this, because this is a latest quote that he had, that it is not always natural causes. I guess it is.
Now, who said, which medical doctor said this?
This would be Dr. Trump.
No, all right. So 50 years ago, in the early days of autism, they said autism was caused by a cold and unloving mother. I think that was the same theory as to why kids ended up gay, like bad mothering.
I wouldn't listen to Dr. Trump. I don't think he has a medical degree. But I do want to bring something interesting to the panel. It's a country called Liberia. I had dinner last night with a medical doctor from Liberia, and he actually received his medical degree in Ukraine, and he's from Liberia. And so I had to look up what happened in Liberia. It was a mess down there. 250,000 people died in a big civil war. And you think, well, that's not much, because that's what happened to Ukraine. Their population is only 1.1 million. And in his unfortunate case, his dad and his uncle were both murdered. And so he wanted to get out of Liberia. So he went and got his medical degree in Ukraine, and now he's looking for a permanent home place to live. We did recommend Canada, United States, but United States is horrible when it comes to immigrants right now. So Canada might be a better place. UK, because he's English speaking. Liberia is basically an English speaking country off the western part of Africa, as it was founded by American slaves, or freed American blacks who didn't want to live in America. So went to Liberia, and it prospered for a long time until the Charles Taylor era. And then all of a sudden they had these big civil wars, which were just horrendous. Now it's somewhat stable, but it still apparently has issues, even though it does produce a lot of minerals like rubber and all these other different types of things. But he's looking for a home right now. He has a medical degree, just got his MD degree. He's looking for a place to hang his shingle and go to work. Maybe go to work in Bangladesh. You guys speak English there, don't you?
Yeah, maybe you can go to work in Bangladesh, or maybe he'll be one of the several people of international background that work, and you know this because you have had, I believe, medical attention at this particular place, but maybe he'll wind up working at Duke or UNC or one of those places that has a lot of people that are of foreign background that work at those particular hospital. So maybe he'll wind up working there. I know one of the most interesting jobs I ever had was I did medical translation at UNC. It was a temporary job, and it is very hard. Rick can maybe relate
Actually, Mark,
foreign accents if they're trying to and using those big medical words and the foreign accents as a mixture. It's a hard translation.
Durham used to be called the City of Medicine.
It still is. It still is.
The City of Medicine. So maybe I'll go to Durham. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I guess I have the job of fact checking everything Nick says, or anybody says. Actually, the population the population of Liberia is actually almost just over 5.5 million. Not more.
5.5 million. I guess I was looking at some old data. 5.5 million. Okay, so 250 isn't so bad on a 5.5 million.
No, it's still bad, but I
It's
just
still
wanted
bad.
to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It is.
Yeah, it's
it's
still
father
bad.
and both murdered.
And it was considered to your point, it was considered a progressive country. Like you said, it was founded by the freed slaves that did not want to necessarily stay here. And I want to say that even a famous African American was part of the people that were organizing trips to go there. And all along those lines, I'm trying to remember which one it was and everything along those lines. But I do know there were trips that were there. I think it was the Black Line or something like that. But I did have a quick question for everybody because
And
there
they
was
speak
a lot of
English, by the way.
excitement and everything along those lines. There was a lot of excitement about Pope Leo and the fact that he was an American Pope and everything. But apparently, because that's what you have to do, he is now saying that he's Roman. So I am Roman, Pope Leo says, as he becomes the Bishop of Rome. So he's asking folks to renew our devotion to Mary. And he tells the mayor of Rome today, I can say that through you and with you, I am Roman. And of course, communion requires prayer, listening, and conversion, according to what the Pope says. So definitely we'll see how this all plays out. But I know a lot of folks were excited that we had an American Pope because the Vatican is in Rome. He has to definitely kind of acknowledge his Roman background as well. So I think that's what he was doing, is acknowledging the Roman part of the Catholicism. So maybe people won't be as excited about him being a member of the whole notion of being an American as well. I'm trying to remember that is the one that I think helped people get to Liberia through his boat plans and all along those lines. So that was the civil rights activist that I was trying to remember from way back in the day.
Hello?
Yeah, I'd like to, if I can, find out the thoughts of people's opinions of Europe offering, I guess, was it half
$500 million.
Yeah, to scientists and any of the, brain drain. I think 75. There was some sort of polling done of the scientists and such experts that are considering leaving America, and it was like 75%.
So Europe absolutely should take advantage. It's to their advantage. Somebody on Twitter called it reverse Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was when all the advancing armies swept into Germany and across, the whole of Europe, and U.S. grabbed a ton of science talent, including the Nazi Dr. Werner von Braun, brought him over here, kind of swept their Nazi stuff under the rugs so we could take advantage of their scientific expertise. Von Braun ran the beginnings of the U.S. space program, and now Europe is like, all right, if U.S. scientific credibility is in tatters because we're being mean to foreigners, then let's sweep up the world's most brilliant people.
Too bad Nick is gone.
Nick.
And I mean, I don't know how many scientists.
I'm back with a
billion, but it's
I'm
probably.
back. There will be no dead airspace when me and Jatovi get into it. So bring Jatovi on, because I need to round.
Well, Jatovi's here, and since Jatovi's here, I'll get back to what I was talking about earlier, because Dr. Sharice mentioned the rise of populism, and that's part of what Marcus Garvey was doing, was this kind of populism movement, but it didn't get the kind of attention and the love that this populism movement got and everything like that, because he was trying to get people from America, and this was in the early 1920s and everything, to move to Liberia and all along those lines. He did have a number of organizations that were trying to get it, and born in 1887, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Community League, most commonly abbreviated as UNIA, an organization dedicated to racial pride and economic self-sufficiency. But definitely he was trying to get more and more people to return to their homeland in Africa, specifically Liberia. So like I said, I don't know that it got a lot of traction, and it definitely did not get a lot of traction from the greater society and all along those lines. And to your point, yeah, Liberia today has a population of around 5 million with English as the official language, and there are more than 20 indigenous languages spoken and everything like that. So, and even back then, it wasn't going to be cheap, because apparently transporting African Americans back to Africa wasn't going to be cheap even in 1920. So he launched the Liberian Construction Loan Program to raise $2 million for the Universal Negro Improvement Association settlement in Liberia. The $2 million would also include a promised and sizable loan to the government of Liberia. So almost immediately, Garvey's followers brought up nearly $150,000 worth of bonds to finance the plan. So this was something that folks were going in, and even Liberians supported Garvey in this effort and everything like that. So we're talking about the current state of Liberia and some of its history as well.
Well, they also are nice enough to speak English, but now I've got to rattle Jatovi's chains since he's here. If he wasn't here, I'd be quiet. And this is about, and we're going to be talking later on economics, the big, beautiful tax bill of our wonderful president, Donald J. Trump. Number one, he's going to create, now this comes direct from my White House sources, create the largest permanent tax cut in American history. No tax on tips. Taking care of these poor people that are getting tips. No tax on overtime. Hard-working Americans getting no tax. Historical tax relief to Social Security recipients like myself who need a lot of tax breaks. Then number two, he's going to deliver mass deportations. Finish the Trump border wall. Notice it's not the border wall. It's the Trump border wall. Boost border patrols and ICE agents on the front lines. Nothing could be better than this beautiful bill that's going through. It was passed by the House, by the way. Protecting Medicaid by removing 1.4 million illegals from receiving the benefit. What could be better than protecting Medicaid by getting rid of the people that are on it that shouldn't be? And requiring able-bodied Americans to work if they want to receive the benefit. Requiring the largest deficit reduction in 30 years. We haven't seen anything like this since Clinton. 1.3 trillion in mandatory savings. And he promotes American.
You're just trolling here, because the
No, I'm not trolling. I'm reading directly from the White House. I get the White House.
The White House bullshits America. That bill.
No, wait. This is the White House. This is your White House, Rick. Do you have a problem with it? Do you have a problem with America?
Yeah, they have an honesty program. So that bill is, according to more objective evaluation, will add
this is from the White House, your president speaking. And they says promote America first by incentivizing made in America products, protecting American farmers, revolutioning our defense capabilities, unleashing Americans' energy dominance. There can't be anything better on this planet for America than Donald J. Trump. And it's right here in the White House report.
All right, so, you've convinced
me. Of course, the White House is going to say everything that is.
Jacoby agrees with me, so that's the reason I brought him on, because Jacoby is certainly pro-American. They want to do anything to disrupt the American dream and the one big, beautiful bill that's we're going to be discussing with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, in about 25 minutes. It'll be on. I don't think I sent John an invitation because he's a Canadian. And this is an American thing, making America great again.
We got Shaquille Silly. We haven't heard from you in weeks and weeks. What do you have?
Well, I've been travelling, as you can see. I've changed my name down to reflect that I'm in Fiji. I'm flying back to Australia tomorrow. Apparently, Qantas has sent me an email saying that there's flooding and bad weather, and The news says there's been a few gangland shootings in Sydney, which we're not used to seeing. So hopefully I'll be back in Sydney tomorrow. As for a couple of comments here, the big, beautiful bill, if it was tax relief to the working class proposed by Democrats, then I'm sure that we'd have a totally different response from the panelists today. But of course, it's Donald Trump. Everything that Donald Trump does is wrong. I mean, if he cured cancer, you guys would find a way to spin that in the most negative light. No president's perfect, no policy is perfect, but to suggest that, it's just terrible and it's just a tax cut for the rich and blah, 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 it's nonsense. And Rick, I do want to just make a comment about your earlier comments. Why exactly is it racist or some MAGA conspiracy to question some of the evidence that's been brought out in relation to George Floyd?
Well,
What
because,
the
all
way
right,
you
what people
described
are
it.
doing. All right, so two autopsies were done. Both concluded homicide. All the people who are saying otherwise take one page of these autopsies, which I'm sure each ran a dozen pages or more, and throw up just the one page that mentioned he had fentanyl in his system, not a fatal amount. Wait. So you got to show the whole autopsy. If you're going to show one page and say it exonerates Floyd, then you need to show the entire autopsy, which doesn't. So that it's a little bit bullshit.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit bullshit. Okay. I'm not going to stand up for Derek Chauvin, and I'm not going to sit here and defend the memory or legacy of George Floyd. But his defense lawyers have brought up a point in relation to this fentanyl stuff that is really, really valid. The point, which it's certainly valid of some legal question, and he may well win an appeal based on this. And the question about the fentanyl in his system is, when did they do the blood test? Did they do it while he was still alive at the hospital? Because a lot of people don't know that he didn't die on the streets. He died in hospital. So did they conduct the blood test then, or did they conduct the blood test after he died? Because that can change the level of fentanyl that you would expect to see. Now, it turns out that what they represented in court, what the prosecution represented in court in relation to those tests, may have been incorrect. That's the claim. That's the claim that's being made by Derek Chauvin's defense lawyers. So, look, I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm not a lawyer. But to suggest, you can have your chance to speak if you want to Toby. I can't read that because I'm on my phone. To suggest that anybody who sees this on the news and finds out that this is the information, that in fact he may have had a higher level of fentanyl in his system, that the original autopsy results didn't say that he died from a result of asphyxiation or anything like that, but that he probably died from heart problems and drug use, and that was changed. To suggest that people who see that on the news are all a bunch of racists is exactly the reason why the Democrats just got the result they got in the last election. Not everybody who questions this is some sort of raging lunatic.
How do we go from talking about Trump increasing the debt to this?
Because Toby, Rick Rosner brought this comment up about 15 minutes ago, and I wasn't able to get on because of various technical issues that will happen.
Oh, I didn't know that we were switching because I thought we were on the bill part of it. But just to point out, everything you said about George Floyd was all conspiratorial and already proven wrong. He's been proven to have been choked to death, so that was already done.
He hasn't been proven. That's not what the autopsy report says, Toby, and you know it. Okay, and even if it was, the issue that's in front of the courts right now is his lawyers have lodged an appeal, and that's what's being examined.
Could I speak real quick? Did they go to court over this? Yes. Was it already proven in court? Yes. What you're doing right now is trying to gaslight people using something coming from the right wing that is trying to express that has already been disproven. So why are we going back to this now?
Yeah, can I quickly read?
It's been in the news that his lawyers have actually appealed based on this very issue and based on the prosecution having provided them with information that was materially incorrect And one of his claims is that he had ineffective assistance of counsel, a Sixth Amendment violation, as a result of that.
So let me clarify.
He hasn't lost the appeal yet.
Hold on. I'm reading the state of his appeal. So Chauvin was convicted in federal court and state court. Both are 20-year plus sentences running concurrently. So he's still appealing the federal conviction. His appeal of his state conviction has been denied. So even if he somehow, by a fluke, managed to overturn the federal conviction, he's still staying in prison for more than 20 years based on the state conviction. And I mean, there's video of him. Just because you have drugs in your system doesn't mean it's not murder, or at least, second degree or, manslaughter. Somebody kneels on your neck for 9.5 minutes.
Rick, I'm not defending Derek Chauvin, but what I'm saying is, if his lawyers have put up an appeal that is going in front of the courts, and you are then suggesting that everybody who is questioning what's going on with that case must be doing so because they are racist, I think that's a bit rich. This is something that affected people all over the world. We had protests about this in the UK, in Australia, all over the Western world we had protests about this. And to suggest that everybody goes, oh, is there something more to this case? We're hearing stuff on the news.
That's true. When I said that, I'm in the back of my head, a little voice is saying, is everybody who's saying this a complete a-hole? And I'm screw it.
To point out.
So is that entirely fair? I mean, no.
Hold on. Can we establish something? Because we keep doing this semantic argument, which is ridiculous. When we say there is no theft, we know that there is theft that's still out there at a small percentage. When we say there is no shrink in a store, we know that there's shrink in a store at a particular percentage. When we say that everybody is racist, it's not speaking to everybody being racist or everybody being an a-hole. We know that there's a percentage on there. What you're doing is making a very straw man semantic argument that everything is this or everything is that.
You weren't even here for it. So you weren't even here for the comment, Toby. Now you're making a comment on something you weren't even here to say.
Just a real quick point. We know that the appeal, as Rick just pointed out, was declined in the state. We already know that this has already been through court. Why we are relitigating this now or trying to makes no sense when we should be on the topic that actually Nick brought up, talking about the bill that would be adding more money to the debt. It is not paid for itself. But again, we're talking about George Floyd and trying to relitigate that for no reason at all, just to get your giggles out of it.
No, because
you're about to have an entire hour show dedicated to the bill, Jacoby. So don't talk to me about gaslighting, champ.
Well, it's the 5-year anniversary of his murder. That's why it's all over Twitter. That's why people are talking about it.
That's why he brought it up and everything.
Hold on, wait. Shaq makes a good point. In couples counseling, you're told not to use absolute language. You never take out the trash. You always leave your socks on the floor. When you say like absolute, when you say everybody's an a-hole, everybody's a racist, it doesn't contribute to.
But the main point that I'm trying to bring up, though, is not really just that. It is that if his lawyers are bringing up that argument and it has any validity in the federal court, one would assume that could cause the state to actually re-examine this issue. So this could be a very big issue over the next few years, and that's why I'm suggesting that it would behoove Americans to not be so quick to jump to cry racism over something that could be a very, very big question.
It's done
in these matters.
His remaining legal avenues are considered limited according to Police One, which is, I guess, some kind of.
They are. Yes, his issues in state are limited, but presumably, if the federal court says that that the information in relation to those autopsies were incorrect, then that's going to be a pretty big issue.
Shaquille and Jacoby, hold on a second, because John was trying to make a point earlier, and I did want to give him a chance to make a point from Canada because he was trying to break in earlier. So, John, you were trying to make a point of one sort.
No, I just in the team chat, the medical examiner officer ruled Floyd's death a homicide caused by cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement, subdual restraint, and neck compression. In other words, his heart stopped due to the physical restraint by police, not because of fentanyl or other drugs. So that's it. Like Jatovi says, if the defendant wants to bring up relitigate, he's welcome to do so. But we're wasting time. I'd rather be focusing on the bill, because Nick's point.
You have got an hour to do that, everybody. That's the next show that you're being invited to. Is 1 hour based on just that bill.
Shaq, let me point something out to you. You came on here saying that you're not trying to defend Derek Chauvin, yet you're trying to defend Derek Chauvin by saying we should relitigate the whole situation.
When did I say that?
We understand.
When did I say you should relitigate it? I just said it's a direct response to what Rick said earlier, mate.
We understand the situation with Derek Chauvin. Yes, we're talking about the situation after the 5-year anniversary, talking about the situations around it, talking about how the impact of the whole case and so on and so forth. But what you're doing is relitigating, trying to talk about, well, what we should do is actually look at and try and get Derek Chauvin off. That's defending Derek Chauvin.
I've never said anything like that. I've never said anything like that at all. And given that I've spent most of my time battling against police in Australia and Canada and the US, and against a police overreach, I think that's really rich of you to say that. But yet again, you're just going to try to twist what I say to represent me as being something that I'm not. Okay. And in relation to Big Beautiful Bill, I'm happy for you guys to talk, but I'm just pointing out that you are about to go onto a 1-hour show that's going to be based just on that.
You know that Big Beautiful Bill has more of an effect on what's going on in this area than relitigating the George Floyd bill. So do you think that
I'm not relitigating it. Move on. It's not a problem. But we already know what you're going to say about it, because you've been complaining about it for weeks on this show about everything that Donald Trump's doing to the economy. You won't sit there and talk about anything that might be a boost to the American economy, because as usual, everything that Donald Trump's going to do, according to you guys, is going to be terrible. And I don't think that's correct.
Let's hear from John, because you haven't heard from John Shaquille. He's a newer panelist and everything. So, John, your thoughts on the Big Beautiful Bill that Nick brought up earlier. So, and yes, we will have the economic show on that later, but your thoughts on the bill and who it may hurt or benefit and everything like that. But your take on the Big Beautiful Bill.
Yeah, for me, it's obvious that it's going to mostly benefit, and independent people have looked at, the analysis, something like 65% mostly will accrue to the richest segment of American population and hurt the lowest, the poorest in your country. So if you're rich, it's fantastic. If you're poor or middle class, not so great.
Okay, so that means I don't have any problem with it. So let's go take a look at some.
I didn't say that.
Oh, like I said, I have no problem with it. Okay, so let's take a look at the issues. One of them, create the largest permanent tax cut in American history. Who doesn't want a tax cut here? Raise your hand.
Is it paid for?
Okay, let's go to the next one.
I asked you a question, Nick. That's where my complaint is.
You went to the next one pretty quickly.
Or no?
Nick, I just gave a complaint.
Tax on tips, yes or no?
Nick, hold on. You just said the biggest tax. Nick, you're interjecting when you're not even listening.
I'm asking you a question. You can't answer the question.
You legitimately asked a question, and I gave you a complaint, and you're skipping over that.
Yes,
Nick,
or no?
how are the permanent tax?
No, read the other bill. They attached.
Yes or no?
They attached a 74% increase in tax on minimum wage for people who normally get tips.
The question.
And so by 2027, when you file your taxes that year, you will see a 74% increase on your minimum wage, which is $15,500, which would be around $11,000.
No.
But you're going to get back $10,000. No, thank you, Nick. I'm smarter than that.
I'm going to bring Shaq
Let's
up
do
here. He's
the
the only
math.
guy
Yes,
Okay,
that's
let's
no.
do the math on overtime,
Shaq,
Nick.
look at
Let's
our
talk
face
about
every
the
day
tax
when you're not here.
that
Well,
that
look, the
nobody read the
theory
bill,
on it.
right?
I ask simple
So the
questions, and
tax
the
on the
progressives
bill
go crazy. They
for
can't answer
overtime,
anything.
Well, let
okay,
me
has
let
a
me
limit.
let me respond
And
to
if
it.
you earn over 20% of what your wages
Unbelievable.
are in overtime, then you don't get the tax free. And you might end up paying more than what you did last time, and you didn't earn enough to live off of this year because you are used to living off of your overtime that was normally taxed at a normal rate. So that's how the rules are working out. Go read the bills. Please go read the
Can't
bills.
read
and
the
do
bill.
math
Well, here's an
before
important
you-
point. Here's the
before
important
you
point.
work.
The bill
Please.
is 1,100
I'm not talking about the whole bill, Rick. I'm talking about the
damn it!
feature.
Don't
Why
talk
are
over
you
me.
deflecting?
The bill is 1,100
Republican?
pages long. It contains all sorts of crazy crap that we're
Okay.
barely
Yes, it
aware of.
does.
Okay, can we not focus on 1,000 pages and just focus on one policy issue?
The
Tax
answer
Right,
is
so can I jump in on this? So can I jump in on this?
I'm
I
just
think
gonna tell you do the math.
Hold on a second. Shaquille wants to jump in.
Freaking
Yeah,
Shaq.
Shaq. Look what I have to go through, Shaq. They jump up and down like.
Okay, hold on a second. No, stop it, Nick. We're hearing from Shaquille now.
You know?
Shaquille?
right.
Yeah, Shaq.
So look, there are a couple of issues that I think are reasonable for people to have. For example, the no tax on tips and overtime could cause some employers not to give pay rises to people's hourly rates of pay like they otherwise might have, and that could create some issues. I think there's lots of issues, but Donald Trump's taking a risk. He's doing something which is, fundamentally changing a lot of things in the United States. The question that Jacoby asked, is it paid for?
There's no
I think that
risk
the
on
theory.
him.
I think that the theory that he is hoping for is that the economy will expand by enough to be able to overcome this. Now, is he going to be right or is he going to be wrong? Well, nobody knows that. I mean, you Democrats know everything, so we'll go with that. But for everybody else, I'm not including you on that, John.
I'll
I'm
read
having a
the
go at that.
bill. I'm not a
I
Democrat.
wasn't having a crack at you,
I'm not
John.
a
I don't know you well
Democrat.
enough to have a crack at you, so I wasn't directing that at you.
I would appreciate it if you say you people who read the bill know everything and you independents know everything. But I'm not
You don't think, but I know nothing, right? Because it's not like I worked in finance or anything. It's not like I have qualifications in economics or that I might have read the bill, Kimberly. Yes, I've read the bill. Okay. And the first thing I did, and the first thing that I did, was say something negative about the bill. That's the first thing that I did, and it still wasn't good enough, right? So the issues.
If a person who earns $15,500 a year, that's their minimum wage, and then they get tips. Okay. In 2027, the tax on $15,500 and under will go up by 75%. Well, 74, but let's say 75. Okay, so do the math. So they are due supposedly to get no tax on tips, but they pay on the tax the year, right? They pay on it and they get a tax cut at the end of the year. So then they file for the tax cut. So say maybe they get back $6,000 from the taxes that were paid on their tips. Odds are it wasn't that much. But say maybe they get back $6,000. What is, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, what is the math
You call me
on
Smarty Pants when you're cutting me off, and you're not even acknowledging where I'm agreeing
I know,
with
but
you.
you're not listening. Do the math.
What do I need to listen to? You've cut me off. So why would I need to listen to you about something?
75% of $15,500 that they're going to owe by 2027. What's the math?
I'm not playing these games with you. It depends on deductions.
It's not a game. You said you do
look,
finance.
again,
do the math.
do you guys want me to weigh in on the subject or not?
No, I do. I got
Do you want me to weigh in the subject or not? Or do you only want me to weigh in the subject? Yeah, as usual, you only want me to weigh in the subject by answering the questions that you want to ask me in order to elicit the responses that you want me to give you.
Theory wrong.
What theory did I say that was proven wrong?
Do it. You say you're a financial.
What theory did I say? Excuse me, Kimberly. What theory did I offer that was wrong?
What is 75%?
I just keep saying do the math. What theory did I give that you say I am wrong on?
Okay, you know what? Rick can do the math. Seems how you can.
Yeah,
Rick,
okay, see?
what's the
That's
math?
exactly. You don't want to let me say anything about economics in relation to this. You only want to elicit certain responses.
I asked for math, and you go, no, I'm not going to play games.
No,
Okay,
Shaq, I
Mr.
actually
Republican,
legitimately
I
have a
don't play
question for you.
No, excuses. Rick, what's the math? Just
Well,
simple
what
math.
excuses?
That's
You
all
don't
I
even
ask
know
for.
what I'm going to say. You don't even know what I'm going to
You didn't
say,
answer.
Kimberly.
You're not answering the question. Okay,
Because you interrupted me during my answer in order to
you
ask a
interrupted
question
me
deliberately
while I
designed
was
to elicit a
asking you.
response that you want.
Hold on a second. There's too much back and forth between you and Kim and
You
Shaquille. I
interrupted
think
me
Nick
while
had
I was
a. I
asking
think
to do the math on the
Jacoby had a
formula.
question.
How
and
much
everything.
tax
I don't
will
need to do the
the
maths on a
people making
fictitious
minimum
tax
wage
return to
have
make the
to pay?
comments that I want to make about
How
this
much?
bill, okay, and the
How
effects
much?
on the economy. I don't need to do that. All right, I can concede the point to you that there's going to be people that are worse off. I don't need to do the specific maths on a fictitious return, okay?
It
So if
does
I
need
can
to
just
be
continue, oh
The
look, go for it,
consequences are
Kimberly.
horrible. If you're a
Second,
financial man, you would
Shaquille
look
was
at the
trying to make a point.
consequences.
Let Shaquille talk.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Shaquille.
For me personally, I don't live in the United States, so this isn't going to affect me directly, okay? The issue that I think that he's trying to do, and he's talked about this with his golden visas and a number of other things that he's talked about doing, okay, is he's trying to attract international money. Now, the problem with doing that is the issue with why people always say the United States outperforms places like Europe. It's because the United States doesn't generally provide the kinds of social services that countries like Canada, Australia, the UK, and most of Western Europe provide. Now, I would argue, personally, as it might come as a surprise to you guys, I would argue that the lifestyles enjoyed by people in those other countries are often much nicer because they don't have to worry about things like healthcare and education costs, etc. However, whilst this could be hurtful and it could be something that ends up harming the everyday worker and the people at the bottom, it is also possible that it could create an influx of investment into the United States. The mass macroeconomic effects of that is something that we can only theorize right now. We will have to see how that goes over time. Now, if he is wrong, this will be a real stain on the legacy that he wants to leave. If he is correct, then that'll be something that will be positive that I'm sure that Democrats will incorporate into their future policy position.
So here's the math. Here's the analysis that I read. So most people in the bottom 20%, poorest Americans, pay zero federal tax. And people making less than 51,000, most of them probably pay zero federal tax, the bottom 40%. What will happen, according to an analysis of the bill, is that these people will pay more because they're not getting SNAP, food stamps. They're not getting as much coverage from Medicaid. So if you're in the bottom 20%, this bill will likely cost you an average of $1,035 a year in paying for services you're currently getting. And if you're in the bottom 40%, making less than $51,000, it'll cost you an average of about $700 a year. So yeah, so it would be great if we could grow out of the deficit by attracting foreign investment. To do that, Trump will have to quit acting so crazily xenophobic and scaring foreign investment away from the U.S.
Well, he has scared some foreign investment, not all, but you're right. He has certainly stressed some international relations. But again, there's plenty of time for him to rectify that and to change that. For example, he's given 90-day reliefs and things like that on some of the tariffs. Just in relation to the comment you've made, though, here's one of the issues. When people say the tax cuts benefit disproportionately the wealthy, this is a problem in the United States which is much more exacerbated than most other countries because of how progressive your tax rates are. And because of the fact that you've got a situation where the top 10% are paying 50% of the taxes, or the top 10% are paying 9% of the tax, whatever the rate is, right? You can't lower taxes without that being the effect. You can't have a broader tax base unless you actually tax people at the bottom. You can't have it both ways. And what America always seems to try to do is push themselves into this hole. And then one side says, well, we're going to do this. And the other side says, well, you love the rich and you hate the poor. You can't go on like this. You can't go on with a $35 trillion debt and a $2 trillion deficit every year and expect the rest of the world to have confidence in the United States. You've lost your AAA credit rating and bond yields are up.
Okay,
let me get the question out.
Let me get the question out.
We need to give them an opportunity to share in the tax burden that rich people have shared in for years. So having a tax
question and then we'll wrap up the show and everything.
Hold on, Nick, hold on. I wanted to ask Shaq as an economist.
The opportunity to get your question out.
Let me ask this as an economist. And as
I'm not an economist. I'm a market analyst. I'm not an economist.
As a market analyst, as somebody who works, who knows, finances, this is your wheelhouse. Now, looking at where we are, as you just pointed out, with the credit rating dropping, with the economy that just shrank last or the GDP that shrank last quarter, and it might actually be either sitting at the same or it might shrink again. Consider that would leave us with either a recession or stagflation. So we're sitting at the same point. Stock market is very volatile at this moment based on him putting on and taking off tariffs and everything else. And the reason I asked the question, was it paid for? And I'm glad that you answered and you said in theory. And that's where I want to stick. Because when we're talking about in theory, and we're in a very volatile state, as an economist, as somebody, or as a market analyst, and somebody who deals with people's money, would it be safe or would it be helpful to go on an in theory, something that hasn't worked prior, but an in theory, or something that is paid for? So which one would be more beneficial for us to do? Something that is already paid for, that is written in a plan and taken care of, or something in theory that I think may work? Because as you pointed out, if it doesn't work, we're in a bad position. So which one, as a market analyst, for you?
Well, for me personally, and for the way that I have invested in the past when I've had clients, I don't invest in directional positions on the market. But I'll answer your question nonetheless. Certainly, it is the cause of incredible consternation amongst the international community about the direction of the United States. One of the things, for example, is if you're trying to bring back all these manufacturing jobs to the United States, you could very well see something like what you've seen in the automotive sector, where American-made the vehicles in America are made in America, but those very same companies continue to make the goods for the international community elsewhere. We saw that with Mercedes. I think BMW does that. You can see that sort of fracturing. I think you'll also be likely to see a lot of back office jobs move away from the United States as a cost-saving measure for those companies that were forced to come back. I think that when it's not as easy for a company like Apple, for example, to just click their fingers and move factories back to the United States because of the billions and billions of dollars worth of investment that takes. So there is certainly a lot of danger there in relation to, how safe the US becomes. I don't think anyone's ever going to think the US would default, although Republicans ran the gauntlet with that with Democrats a couple of years ago. I don't think that they would default. But yes, it makes it less attractive and more unstable because you can't plan. And also Donald Trump's only going to be able to be there until 2028. So it's very hard for a business to plan out what they're going to do over the next 5 or 10 years if they don't really have any idea of what that's going to look like in the future.
So I looked up how many countries have national debt. All of them except for one. The only one who doesn't is New Zealand. I looked where the U.S. stands in terms of per capita national debt. U.S. and Australia are neck and neck at 20th and 21st. And the countries that have more per capita national debt are a lot of these fancy-ass liberal democracies where things are nice. Belgium, Norway, Finland, France, Sweden, Denmark, Germany all have more per capita national debt than we do.
Well, I think you really have to look at debt as a percentage of GDP. The economy in New Zealand, whilst it doesn't have a lot of debt, the economy of New Zealand is not travelling particularly well right now. But let me just point something out. I've said this for years on these shows. The United States I haven't looked at the most recent figures, but the United States historically gets around 25% of the GDP in federal taxes. Australia gets about 27%. Both of those countries have amongst the highest progressiveness in their tax rates, which means that everybody's unhappy. The very wealthy feel like they're paying too much. The people at the bottom feel like they're not getting enough, and the people in the middle feel like they're getting squeezed on both ends. What you don't see when you go to Finland, Norway, the Nordic countries in general, what you don't see is people resenting what is relatively high taxes that they pay because they feel like they're getting something back from government. So you don't see that level of resentment. You do see it in the United States, and even in Canada. I spent a lot of time up in Canada. I don't generally see that much resentment. It's been growing a little bit under Trudeau, but you generally see the Canadians are more happy with the tax system they've got. But just about everyone in America hates it.
Part of it is we're babies. Part of it is we have right-wing media that gets people worked up. Our tax rates,
but you've got left-wing media that works people up too. To be fair,
okay, sure, but it's the getting people pissed off business. But like our tax rates are pretty great, certainly much better than they were in the 60s when the top marginal tax rate was 91%. If you made more than $1 million in 1962, anything you made more than $1 million,
but very few people were paying that, and that was where we were talking about this some months ago when I was on the show with you, Rick. We were talking about Arthur Laffer with his Laffer curve and other economic achievements that he's made, talking about the optimum tax rate. But look, the US has had a history of trying to examine different ways of raising taxes. You guys have tried tariffs many years before. The great Henry Ford, Henry George talked about having land tax on the unimproved value of land and things like that. I don't think it's unreasonable for a Democrat or a Republican to say that the tax system in the United States needs an overhaul. And you may not like what Donald Trump's doing, but I think that he's really doing something that's much different. And whatever failures there is, it gives the other side a chance to correct those failures and take it back in a different direction. Otherwise, what are you going to have? You're just going to, the only proposal that I've heard is increasing the top rate of marginal tax in the US. That's not going to work.
One last thing. The only person paying 91% on his taxes in 1962 was Elvis, because the colonel was an illegal alien who didn't want to get caught he didn't want to run afoul of the IRS or anybody, so he let Elvis pay $910,000 on every million he made.
But just to point out, this is why I had asked you that question, Shaq, and I'm glad you kind of answered, but you also agree that what he's doing is very risky and causing problems. So, and then you went and said that Donald Trump is doing something. If I want to remodel this room, if I take a match to it, sure, I've remodeled the room and burnt the room down, and I did something, but not always doing something is the right way to do things.
Especially when the experts say it's a bad idea.
Exactly.
Okay, and you know what, guys? I accept that. Sorry, John.
Shaq, that's the issue. Analysts, experts in this field have said tariffs is a stupid idea. The tax bill is going to hurt disproportionately the poorest, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that Trump is going to be doing something that's never been done and we'll see how it works out is awful.
John, they're not all experts say that. And J.D. Vance gave a speech a handful of months ago, and he addressed that exact issue. He actually said that we listened to.
Hold on.
I'm not partisan. Look, I'm agreeing. I'm actually agreeing with you guys on so much, and you still call me a partisan. Just let me respond to you, please.
Non-partisans.
But it doesn't matter whether someone's non-partisan or not. There are also people that don't agree or that think that it may do some good. Look, J.D. Vance talked about this before, that people listening to experts all the time in relation to globalization may not have actually worked out so good for America, which was really a direct hit on the kind of economic legacy left by Ronald Reagan. But let me just come back to a point.
One quick thing. That's all we have. That's all we have.
Also, just to point out,
as lay people, we have to rely on experts.
Just to point out,
before you jump into Toby, please, let me just say this to you, okay? Look, we here in Australia had pretty much the same trajectory in our election as what you guys had in Canada. Okay, we had a fairly what appeared to be a fairly popular right wing candidate that we call our right wing party, the Liberal Party. You guys call it, I think, the Nationals. So what happened was your Conservative leader was up at 70% in the polls, and then he just fell off a cliff and lost his own seat. That's exactly what happened to the right wing party or the centre right party in Australia. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and whinge about the Labor Party policies in Australia forever, because whilst I highly disagree with what they're trying to do, and in some cases they're talking about taxing unrealised capital gains, I think that's a terrible idea, but they won the election, they have the right to do that. Donald Trump went to the election saying that he was going to do a lot of things, not even economic things, that have actually upset a lot of people, like the mass deportations and all of those sorts of things. Now, I think I'm not really a fan of how he's going about doing a lot of these things. I think a lot of people who voted for him, obviously I didn't because I'm not American, I think a lot of people are like, he's going about this very, very aggressively. But at the end of the day, he's won the election. This is the direction that he wanted to take the country in. And this is the direction that the country voted for. So you can sit there and talk about how bad it's going to be economically, but I think you have to kind of wait to see how it's going to play out.
Just to interject real quick, most people in the U.S. voted for somebody other than Donald Trump. So therefore, to say that this is where the country wanted to go is not true. Then on top of that, when you say
he won the popular vote, they won the popular vote, right?
Shaq, look at the numbers. Let me point this out. Look at the numbers, the actual facts. The majority of people voted for somebody else than Donald Trump. Sure, he won the popular vote. That just means he was the only one person who got more votes than Kamala Harris. Sure,
you never say that we talk about Australian politics. Our Prime Minister's got elected with 30% of the popular vote. Come on.
Shaq, I allowed you to finish. Please allow me to finish. So again, saying that, okay, well, this is where the country wanted to go. No, we can have regrets. People can be upset and actually be upset about where he's taking the country. We don't have to sit back because he is not a king, even though he's trying to rule like one. So therefore, to say that this is where the country goes, this is where the people voted, even now he's underwater on everything across the board, which means people are upset at what he is doing. And we have the right to do that, even though he's trying to take that right away. So again, when
we're trying to take the right of you being upset away,
yes, he is. He's legitimately trying to do that. Matter of fact, he's going just right now. He's demanding Harvard give names and countries of where people are going to Harvard. So again, that's authoritarian.
You're complaining a lot of different things.
That is exactly what he just did. That's what he just did.
Let me get some words.
What I wanted to point out to you again. Just doing something is not the best way to go. As John points out, there are experts. We consider you to be somebody as an expert. This is why I asked you about the economy. You're talking about going to talk with David Walker. He's supposed to be an expert on the economy.
I don't have time to go and see him today. I'm sorry.
No, there are experts in particular fields. There are percentages of people. The vast majority of these experts say what he's doing is wrong. And then on top of that, in his actual quotes, what he said he was trying to do. And this is why, going back to the important piece of that bill and how it's going to be paid for. Remember, during the campaign, he said he was going to cut all these taxes and pay for them by tariffs. That is an impossibility to do. And what he's doing now by demanding now the EU, he's given up on a deal and going to jump up to this 50% tariffs. And he's demanding iPhones be created in the U.S. when honestly it's cheaper for them even just to with the tariffs to still stick with their.
Let me say something before.
What he's doing is wrong, realistic. And how he's burning down the house is wrong, but he's just doing something. We can't celebrate.
So let's be realistic about the situation. Right now, Trump has impunity. He pulls a lot of stuff out of his butt. You know, he's not the most systematic thinker, but whatever he says, he has a team who will implement that. And the Democrats can't do anything. They're leaning back. They're letting it play out. He's trying a ton of stuff. A lot of it's chaotic. And it's even understand everything that's going on will take months and years to sort out. And like this bill with 1,100 pages all sorts of goodies for Trump and for the Republicans. And right now it's pretty chaotic. And we don't know what's going to happen.
Signed in the middle of the night.
People
It's
who are
also
signed in the middle of the night.
Yep. Even in that
as Democrats did with many of their bills, and the amount of pork that there is in Democrat bills. I'm not going to play a partisan game in your politics, but I'd like to address the 3 points that we just made. The tariffs.
Real quick. Just even in
Yeah,
that
I can't
bill
respond
that
without
Rick
you
is
pointing out
talking
something
about, I
else.
just wanted to add this because you didn't even address it. Even in the bill that Rick was talking about, and the stuff that John was talking about, the reason why it's passed in the middle of the night is because there are problems within that bill that don't even deal with the economy. They're talking about restraining the courts so they won't have to answer to the courts based on, citations for violations of injunctions or temporary restraining orders. So now we're really adding extra stuff in the bill.
Okay, let me just stick to the economic issues that were brought up there. We can go into all sorts of things. You can sit there and say to me, well, Kristi Noem was asked at that inquiry to explain habeas corpus. Now, although she's not a lawyer, the fact that she couldn't answer that very well is not a good look, right? But if we're going to just focus on these, could the United States or any country replace its entire tax code with tariffs? Could that happen? Look, possibly, but the result of it may not be very good, especially for the United States, because the United States, on a net basis, actually exports more than they import. So, whilst it could, what are you laughing at? There are some countries that have a tariff system instead of taxes.
You could not say that a country cannot replace their tax code with tariffs.
Not saying.
You went to the whole.
It could.
Well, possibly.
It could, possibly.
Come on, Shaq. You know for a fact the math doesn't add up. You
exactly what I just said. That's what I said. Could a country? I didn't say could the United States. I said could a country replace its tax system internally with a tariff system? That's what I said, and I said possibly it could, but it wouldn't work very well for a country like the United States. So what part of that are you disagreeing with?
I'm just saying it can't. Why can't you say that they cannot rather than, well, they possibly could?
I said it wouldn't work very well for the United States, and I was going on to give you reasons why it wouldn't work for the United States. What is your problem?
Then it cannot. You're arguing some.
I'm arguing. You've interrupted me, and now you're going to tell me that I'm arguing semantics.
It can't be replaced. The U.S.
Okay, do you want your opinion or mine?
Cannot be replaced with tariffs.
It arguably could be. It just wouldn't work very well.
How it could?
Okay. It arguably could be because if you let me speak, I'll tell you.
How?
If you let me speak, I'll tell you. Because if you were to get rid of all income taxes and replace it with a withholding tax, which is something that's been argued by economists on the left, by the way, a withholding tax on profits generated from overseas investors on investments within the United States, and you had tariffs and other types of levies, that could arguably have an indirect taxation. It would work somewhat similar to a national sales tax. Now, that's something that's not very popular in the United States. It would be very, very clunky. And I would argue that it would work terribly, but could you do it? Well, you could do anything by forcing it. Okay. I just don't think that would be a very good idea for the United States. But I don't really think that was the argument that he was making when he was talking about tariffs originally. Originally, he was trying to offset some of the tax cuts with tariffs, which, again, I said this last year before the election, that the issue with that is that the United States exports more than it imports. So having a tariff isn't going to have a very good effect because the other countries are just going to have retaliatory tariffs. You'll be in the same position, if not worse. Rick?
So I looked up, you said a more important measure is debt as a percentage of GDP. So I looked it up. The U.S. is 42nd in the world in debt as a percentage of GDP. And above us, with more debt versus GDP, are a bunch of fairly fancy countries. The UK, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Norway, so we're not in an unusually dire situation versus the rest of the world.
I'm concerned about the debt level for the United States in a way that I'm not concerned about the debt levels in Sweden. But the other issue, and again, I've been arguing about this a lot when we talk about taxation and what the right taxation plan should be. I don't think it should be an argument about what the right rate should be. Should the rate be 40%? Should it be 60%? Should it be 91%? The question should be, what percentage of the GDP of the United States do you want the federal government to take? And then supplementarily, because you have all your different states, what percentage you want the states to have? And then they should be targeting that. The income taxes, I don't think is a very good way of doing it. Now, I would actually argue that an increase in capital gains tax and some other type of investment tax, which would actually hurt somebody like myself, by the way, would actually be better as a way to raise the revenue. But the way that the United States keeps trying to do this is by increasing the headline rates of tax for the people in the top income tax level or rate. It doesn't work.
Just to point out, even in this big, beautiful bill, it's disagreeing with your capital gains piece. Then on top of that, if we're talking about—
But I didn't come to defend it, did I?
Hold on. If we're talking about debt being the important piece, which was the huge part up under Biden, right now, what they're doing, they're raising the debt limit with this bill, as well as adding another $3 to $7 trillion to the debt. So therefore, this bill is a bad bill, even according to you, if we're worried about the debt.
There are parts of the bill that I disagree with, and I've tried to go to some lengths to explain which parts I'm unhappy with and which parts I'm concerned about. But all you want to hear is the bits that I don't disagree with, and then just jump all over me, as usual, as you've been doing for the last 5 years. That as soon as I say anything complimentary about Republicans or Donald Trump, you jump up and down and start claiming that I'm some right-wing nut job, which I'm not.
Not at all. I don't do that.
No,
and on the right wing programs, I'll just remind you, on the right wing programs that I do go on, I'm considered to be the resident left. Okay, so I don't know why you guys want to keep trying to depict me in that way.
What minimizes your position, and this is what honestly I saw John laughing as well as I was laughing, was when we talked about that one small piece. You couldn't even say the word "it can't happen in the U.S."
Because I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that.
This is why I say that it epitomizes your position. We can all— I'm for policy over person. I don't care who it is, as long as it's a good policy, as long as it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. I'm not going to jump up and down for Joe Biden. I'm not going to, well, Trump has been racist, so I'm not, we won't deal. That's a whole different animal.
I don't think it's racist. That's a whole different argument.
Yeah, I know. We had that discussion before. So when I'm talking about policy, and when we're talking about, for example, his campaign, he literally campaigned, and this is the problem that we run into on media, and this is what a lot of the right wing does, is they try and sanitize his words. He did not talk about anything else but replacing the tax code, taking away no tax on tips, with only affects roughly about 48 or 42% of the people that actually report those tips in the service industry. So those tips aren't even reported mainly. So it's not really helping a huge amount of people. It's helping a great amount of people, which is a great thing. But then on top of that, when you're raising when inflation's going up and actually prices on everything else are going up, tips are going down. And then actually in Project 2025, and actually the bill that they keep pushing through, that's removed. Yes, Project 2025. The reason I point to that is because there are a lot of people that he has hired that actually wrote Project 2025, and a lot of actually the stuff in the bill comes from Project 2025. So you can hoo whatever you want to, but
there's going to be why are you going off to Project 2025?
Shaq, let me finish my point. When he's talking about no tax on overtime, when in Project 2025, and actually what's going on right now, overtime is being cut because, as you pointed out, it's tough to plan for these things. It's hard to plan in a very volatile environment that Trump has created and what he is doing economically. And even in this bill itself, it's doing these things as what Nick was trying to say, but it's a salesman thing. It's a show thing, because in reality, these things are going away and disappearing. And that's the reality of the situation that you're not even listening to, because when he campaigned on he's going to replace the tax code with tariffs, he didn't talk about, he's going to add these other things. He's going to replace the tax code with tariffs. That's something that can't happen. And this is why I go back to, this is why it epitomizes your whole view. You won't even say that it can't happen. You want to try and come up with some ungodly, I'm going to sanitize and actually say what Trump
I'm
was.
not sanitizing something.
Didn't work
I
that
don't agree. I'm not sanitizing something. I don't agree with you. There's a difference. I
Okay,
don't
you believe
agree
it
with
can
you.
happen then.
Okay? A country could do it, but it wouldn't work very well in a country like the United States. It wouldn't work very well in a country like Canada. One of the things that I think Canada and Australia should look at doing is increasing dramatically the taxes on their natural resources and decreasing the income tax, and in Canada, the inheritance tax, which they claim not to have. Okay? Those are things that I think could boost the economy in Australia and Canada. Could Canada and Australia remove its income tax and just put a tariff on? Well, theoretically you could, but it wouldn't work very well in Canada or Australia. You're going to what?
Theoretically,
Sit
there's
here and
a
browbeat me because I'm saying it wouldn't work very well instead of saying it can't work. I mean, what,
Because it
and
can.
then you accuse me
Until-
show after show after show after show
No,
of
no,
playing
second.
semantics with David.
Hold on a second. Stop the
Seriously.
semantics because it's time for us to wrap up. And they've actually been doing the other show for a while, but we got to get over there as well and everything. But we can continue this conversation on tomorrow. Hopefully, Shaquille will be back. I know he's been busy traveling.
I'll be
like
flying, so I don't think I'll be able to make it up, but I'll try.
Mark, can you send me the invite to the?
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Got it.
Cool.